Hello and welcome to the video. This is my first look overview and first thoughts on this thing here. This is the new Jumper T-Lite radio. Very similar in kind of thought, I think, to the X-Lite radio from FrSky, but this is a multi-protocol radio with that kind of gamer style layout, which is fantastic for thumbers. So in this video I'm going to do my usual stuff. I'm going to go through the unboxing, show you how it comes, go through the specs. We'll take the back off, have a look inside, see how Jumper has put it together, and whether or not they've used those horrid ribbon cables or not, and then talk about some of the really cool stuff on here and some of the stuff I would have liked to have seen. Now, before we get into the weeds, it's worthwhile thinking about how much this radio costs. This is a cheap radio, even has adjustable sticks on here, basic Hall effect gimbals, multi-protocol module available in 2 different versions with both the full 4-in-1 and the more basic setup like Radiomaster did with the TX12, but these are incredibly cheap radios. They're kind of about the same price as a PlayStation or an Xbox controller, but if you get the 4-in-1 version in particular, they'll talk to pretty much anything. So while I unbox this, let me go through some of the specs. You'll see here that I was lucky enough to be sent both versions, the one with the 4-in-1 module and the one with the single module as well, that works with things like FrSky and Futaba. Very similar to some of the other radios recently from people like Radiomaster. The TX12 is the one that only has the single chip. So this is about 166 by 106 by 56 millimeters. The weight listed is 260 grams with an 18650 installed. However, this is the weight with mine with the battery installed in it. You are going to need an 18650 to put into the back, and you're also going to need an SD card if you want to add all the extra OpenTX goodness, things like sound files and stuff like that. Does have 1.3 inch screen. It's a little LCD screen, not super duper high quality, but works absolutely fine with OpenTX. It has Hall effect gimbals. By default, the throw on them is very lightweight, but they are adjustable, which is lovely. Does have the internal multi-protocol module, and it does support things like Crossfire. In fact, the installation of OpenTX does have all the support for CRSF and stuff straight out the box. USB charging from the supplied cable, and there's also loads of stickers on here to warn you that you don't power this thing up without the antenna installed. So now we've got it out of the box, let's have a bit of a closer look at it. Again, the gimbals for me are very, very lightly sprung, however we can change that. So let's have a look at the controls. We have 2 position switches on the back, 3 position switches at the front, and no momentary switches. We have a port out, we have a USB-C port, and those 2 extra ones either side of the antenna are actually for an optional FPV screen. There's the trims by the side of each of the controls, love that. Power button in the middle, and then all the rest of the buttons here are for navigation in the menus for OpenTX. So take you into the system menu, model menu, and other things too. Nothing on the bottom, and on the back there is just the battery bay for the single 18650, and there's also this little port here that you can install the external bay for if you want to put on something like an external module, and I'll show you how easy that is to do in a moment as well. Opening the battery bay, we find yet another warning sticker to make sure it's correctly inserted. The positive side of the battery have to go to the right hand side. I found that trying to put my battery in here, it was a little bit loose. I had to extend the battery tabs a little bit just to make sure that it was working okay. Once the battery's in, powering the unit, you press and hold the button until it powers up, and then it's pretty standard OpenTX stuff. I'll zoom in a minute. The screen is being blown out by the... There we go, that's a bit better. Camera's struggling a little bit. The display is very similar to the kind of things you get on QX7. Very standard kind of layout for this particular kind of radio. So no colour screen or anything of that goodness in here. Just a basic screen that will let you do the stuff you need to do in the menus. For me, the radio that this most closely resembles, note the speaker down there as well, is that X-Lite that I pulled out at the beginning. However, there are a couple of instances when you're actually holding and trying to use this thing. The X-Lite used to feel like a really small radio, but this absolutely does. The gimbals on the FR Sky unit are a lot stiffer and to me feel a lot nicer for it. The switches are very similar in terms of 3 and 2 positions, but there are 2 rotary controls. There's no rotary controls on the T-Lite. The weight is very different as well. Some of that extra weight in the FrSky unit is coming from the fact it has 2 little batteries in here rather than the one single 18650. But overall, the T-Lite does feel nice in the hands. With one point I'll draw your attention to. With the FrSky unit, you can use it as both a thumber and you can also use it as a pincher as well, and they're both reasonably comfortable. The thing that I've noticed playing with this radio here is that while, because of the kind of weird shape of it, while it's really nice for the thumbers, your fingers kind of sit in between the switches at the top and you can get your throws nice and easily. And it feels actually really, really comfortable. It's very, very much like holding a game controller. If I try and put it so that I'm using a pinch, again, the fingers kind of have to sit over the top and around it, but these chunky little cheek pieces at the bottom are kind of stuck out a little bit too far. They're kind of getting in the way. The gimbal feels too far away from the radio, particularly when you see how far the little kind of pads come down. They just seem to be sticking in your hand and just stopping you from being comfortable with pinching. Now, I know one of the big questions I'm going to get asked is, can you use this as a game controller? The answer is absolutely, using the supplied cable, plug it into your machine and let it find the drivers. Just like every other OpenTX radio, away you go. That will also charge the onboard battery as well. You can leave it plugged in and it will charge the 18650. So if you wanted to get one of these, maybe just to use it as something like a simulator controller, this actually would work really well. So let's take the back off this. Let's have a look inside and see how it's all put together. And also, while I've got the back off, I'll show you the steps you have to go through to put the external module bay into position. Once you've got the battery out, there are 6 screws, 3 on each side and 2 in the battery bay. Using a regular Phillips screwdriver, you can get to those and you can unscrew them and remove them. And then the back becomes free. There's only one cable connecting the back shell to the rest of the radio, and that's the power cable, and with a little bit of firm pressure that will pop free and let you undo the whole thing. And then here we are inside the radio. There's not a huge amount to look at in here. We have the speaker in the bottom right hand side. We have all of the connections for the switches at the top. The gimbals are going into the central board in the middle. This is the multi-protocol board. I'm guessing this one must be the single version. Only appears to have one chip on, and that just plugs into place. And you can see how minimalistic it is in here. It's got just enough essential parts. The wires aren't twisted, but that doesn't seem to affect how it works. The gimbals seem to center quite well. I will take the opportunity to tighten up the throttle spring just to make that a little bit stiffer, and the really nice thing is you can get into all of the pieces in here and adjust the tension for the individual springs for your aileron, elevator, throttle and rudder. This has only been listed as mode 2 at the moment, so if you are not mode 2, then that might cause you a little bit of a challenge. To install the back module piece is pretty straightforward. Now we've got the back off, what we've got to do is to retrieve the backboard and also get the 3 little screws that are in the pack as well out, and then push the cable through the back of the radio and then just plug it into position into the spare port that's there as well. This is an optional step if you want to use something like a Crossfire system or something else, or Tracer or something like that on this radio, and it's a nice idea. It would have been lovely if that was included and all set up out the box, but it doesn't take too long to fit. It's a 5-minute job. Once you've got the cable into position, then you can use the 3 screws to secure it at the back and then put the radio back together, remembering to reattach the power cable from the battery bay. Only other thing to mention is those 2 screw holes at the top. They are there for an optional FPV screen. You can download and print the support for it. Just put a couple of images on here. These were sent to me by Jumper, so you can kind of see what they're talking about. It's a really cute idea for those who do want to be able to have a little screen on top of their radio to see what's going on as well. So there's a lot to like about this radio. I do like the form factor and the small screen, with the exception of the fact that those little cheeks get in the way if you are a pincher, but more on that in a minute. The internals look good. The quality of the manufacturing and the way everything's been laid out looks nice. I like the fact there's no ribbon cables. That's hopefully going to make it a lot more robust over time. I do like the fact it's got the trim buttons on the face, perfect if you are a flyer of radio control planes that don't have flight controllers in, and the external support for a bay is nice too if you want to use something like Ghost or Crossfire or something like the Tracer system. Obviously OpenTX, so I'm going to like that. OpenTX is one of the most powerful systems around, not particularly easy to use. The screen is a bit small, a bit of an eye test if you don't have teenage eyes. This thing is unbelievably cheap for all the technology that you get in here. I'm really impressed that we have this much radio for this much cash. And again, works beautifully with your PC, so could be a great little radio. If you don't want to leave your main radio that you fly with all the time by your computer to do your sim stuff, this would be a really cute way to use it for that. The gimbals on this are the same as the Jumper T12 Pro. They do feel nice. They feel a lot better once I've given them just a little bit more tension. Again, that's a very personal thing, but they do seem to be working quite nicely and centering well. USB charging, and that ability to add the little FPV screen on the top is quite a cute touch too. There are a couple of things to draw your attention to. First of all is that it is Mode 2 only, and that it isn't great for pinchers due to that width and your index finger having to sit between the switches if you're thumbing. The gimbals do feel a lot smaller than a full-size radio, so though it's talking about a full-size gimbal, it doesn't feel like that. You can extend the sticks, there are adjustable parts to the sticks, but even then it doesn't feel in your hand anywhere near the same size as the full-size radio if that's what you're used to. Navigation buttons work nicely but can be fiddly unless you have smaller fingers. And be aware that there are two versions. The cheaper one only has the single CC2500 chip, and that's the one that uses FreeSky Futaba, Hi-Tech, etc. So if you want the 4-in-1 version that has all the other stuff like Spectrum and things like that, you are going to need the slightly more expensive one. Sadly, no case with this. Maybe that's going to be offered as a separate thing. Hopefully Jumper you will, just to protect this while it's being carried around. This is perfect for throwing in a backpack if you're going hiking, maybe with a quadcopter or a small wing. A case would stop it from being damaged and those gimbals getting knocked. And you will need to power any module that goes on the back of this thing externally if you're using more than about 25 milliwatts. So do be aware of that, because of the single battery inside. If you want to use something like Crossfire and run it at 100 milliwatts, you're going to have to externally power it. That is a bit of a shame. So for me, my initial thoughts and summary kind of run like this. It's a great alternative to the X-Lite from FreeSky if you have been looking for a smaller form factor like this. If you are coming from a background of PlayStation, Xbox, and you're used to this kind of game style controller, this is going to feel fantastically comfortable in your hands, and it's one less thing that you're going to have to get to grips with if you're coming into the hobby. Perfect for use for things like a simulator, and also handy maybe for a second radio, or maybe if you're handing on a whoop or you want to do some training with somebody else, you can set that up with this radio too. Time will tell how well it holds up. I've only had this for 2 days when I'm making this video. But the quality of the construction inside does seem to point to the fact that they have put a bit of thought in how it's gone together. But at this kind of price, I guess we're kind of talking almost at a disposable level. Would I fly my really expensive models with this straight away? Probably not. I'd probably want a couple of months with it first to make sure that it performs flawlessly before I did that. But would I use it for my whoops and smaller quads and stuff like that straight away? Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, I was lucky enough to be sent 2 of these. If you would like to be in with a chance of winning this very radio that I'm showing in this video, then I'm going to do a prize draw, so congratulations for sticking it out to the very end. As usual, standard stuff, like, comment, subscribe, and to make sure that it's only the people who spotted this at the very end, include the words "small but controls all," which is the byline for this radio, in the comment, and I'll pick the winners in a week, 10 days. Good luck to everybody, and hopefully that was useful for all those of you that were interested in what the T-Lite was all about. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organised into easy to follow playlists that, if you're trying to learn a topic, will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.